This video is about the golden layout, the ultimate key mapping framework for pro gamers. Get ready to finally tackle that backlog. Let's start with the core problem this video is trying to solve. Why do PC gamers need a golden layout? Most PC games ship with default key mappings that are designed for accessibility, not for mastery. They are meant to work reasonably well for as many players as possible, regardless of skill level, hardware, or playstyle. What they are not designed for is high-pressure combat, especially boss fights. In normal open-world gameplay, these layouts often seem fine. You have time to think, reposition your fingers, and small mistakes usually don't matter. But boss fights? Those are different. That's why you have that big backlog, right? Boss fights remove time. They increase stress and demand fast, accurate reactions. A major issue is that many players design their keybinds based on comfort. Something feels easy to press, so it must be good, right? I made that mistake. Unfortunately, comfort does not equal performance. Under stress, comfortable keys are often the ones you press accidentally. Survival actions like dodging, blocking, parrying are frequently mapped too far away from your fastest fingers. At the same time, high commit actions like heavy attacks or powerful abilities are often mapped to very easy to press keys. When stress hits, this leads to misinputs. When players fail in these moments, they usually blame themselves. Destroy their controller. You know, you've seen the videos. They assume their reactions were too slow or their skill wasn't good enough. But very often, the real problem is that the layout is working against them. On PC, we're given complete freedom to remap our keys, but almost no guidance on how to do it well. Before going any further, I want to clearly define what this video is and what it is not. The video is strictly about keyboard and mouse. I'm not going to talk about controllers, not now, Steam Deck, layouts, or console bindings. That's intentional, because keyboard and mouse deserve their own discussion. This is also not a video where I tell you exactly which keys you should use. I'm not asking you to copy my layout or anyone else's. Instead, the goal is to give you a framework, a way of thinking about key mapping that you can apply to any game. The focus is specifically on boss fights and other high-pressure combat situations. These are the moments where bad layouts are exposed immediately. By the end of this video, you should understand how to design an optimal keyboard and mouse layout for yourself and how to reuse that logic across different games, instead of starting from scratch every time. If you like this type of video, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like and the notification button. This helps by pushing this video to more people. Leaving a comment helps as well. Why not share your tips on key mappings and other game-related topics in the comments below? Consider joining my Discord, where we can chat about stuff like key mappings for games, improve the framework, why boss fights change everything. Boss fights fundamentally change how you interact with your controls. In an open-world gameplay, you usually have time. You can pause for a moment, think about what to do next, move your fingers into position. Even if you make a mistake, the game often gives you room to recover. Boss fights take all of that away. You don't have time to think. Reactions replace decision making. Stress increases and your hands tense up. When this happens, any weakness in your layout becomes obvious very quickly. Keys that felt fine suddenly feel slow or awkward. Actions you didn't mean to trigger start happening by accident. This is why success in the open world doesn't mean much when evaluating a layout. Boss fights are where layouts are truly tested, because they demand fast, repeatable, reliable input under pressure. One of the biggest mistakes players make is assuming that comfortable keys are automatically good keys. Under calm conditions, this might seem true, but under stress, the situation changes completely. Easy to press keys are more likely to be pressed accidentally. Harder to reach keys are more likely to fail when you need them quickly. This means a layout can feel great during casual play, which is where most people test their layout, and then still completely fall apart during difficult encounters. And then you're giving up on the game. Do I hear Elden Ring? Dark Souls? The problem isn't that the player suddenly got worse, it's that the layout wasn't designed for stress. Performance-focused layouts often feel very strange at first. They're not similar to the default keyboard layout. But that discomfort is not a sign that the layout is bad, it's simply unfamiliar. Comfort comes from repetition, not from optimal design. This brings us to the single most important concept in this video. The golden rule: fast fingers should be responsible for reflex actions. Slower or weaker fingers should be responsible. Survival must always take priority over damage. Actions that keep you alive should be faster and more reliable than actions that deal damage. High commit actions, like heavy attacks, should require intention. If an action is powerful but risky, it should not be something you can trigger accidentally under stress. Everything else in this video builds on this rule. This isn't just a preference issue, it's a physical one. Under stress, your stronger fingers tend to activate faster and more forcefully. Weaker fingers are slower and less likely to fire unintentionally. At the same time, stress reduces fine motor control, making precise movement harder. This means layouts must be designed for moments when your hands are not at their best. A layout that only works when you're calm is not a reliable layout. Boss fights are not just a test of knowledge or strategy, they are a physical test of how well your hands and your controls work together under pressure. To design a good layout, you need to stop treating all actions as equal. Different actions have different requirements, and they should be treated differently. For that reason, we divide actions into categories. In this video, we'll use 3 categories: primary actions, secondary actions, and tertiary actions. If you mix these categories or treat them the same, your layout will eventually fail under stress. Primary actions are survival actions. These include things like dodging, rolling, blocking, parrying, guarding, or primary attack. These actions are used frequently and often need to be triggered instantly. Primary keys must be reachable without any hand repositioning. They must be fast to press and resistant to accidental activation. These are the actions that determine whether you survive or take damage. If your primary actions are slow or awkward to reach, no amount of skill will fully compensate for that. Secondary actions are intentional combat actions. Examples include heavy attacks, charged attacks, or high-risk abilities. These actions are powerful, but they usually come with some form of commitment or vulnerability. Secondary keys must be accessible, but they should not be effortless. You want to choose to press them, not have them trigger by accident when things get hectic. Many layouts fail because they make secondary actions too easy to activate, leading to costly mistakes during these boss fights. Tertiary actions are low pressure and contextual. These include things like switching weapons, changing stances, using gadgets, or interacting with objects. These actions are rarely reaction critical. Because of that, tertiary keys can tolerate slower access. What matters most is that they never interfere with movement or survival actions. These keys should stay out of the way during intense. Most layouts fail because they don't respect these categories. Primary actions are treated like secondary ones. Secondary actions are treated like primary ones. Without a clear hierarchy, stress turns your layout into chaos. A good layout always has a clear order of importance. A golden layout isn't about specific keys or exact bindings. It separates reflex actions from intentional actions. It respects finger strength and reaction speed. It reduces the chance of panic misinputs. Most importantly, it's designed for worst-case scenarios, not the ideal ones. On PC, the mouse is your fastest and most precise input device. Because of that, it is ideally suited for reflex actions. Mouse buttons and mouse wheel directions can be accessed extremely quickly without disrupting movement. Thumb buttons and the scroll wheel are especially important and often underutilized when designing a survival-focused layout. The keyboard plays a supporting role. It handles movement, secondary actions, and tertiary actions. The keyboard should complement the mouse, not compete with it for reflex priority. Boss fights always reduce time and precision. Reaction versus commitment is a universal problem. When your layout logic stays consistent, muscle memory builds instead of being reset every time you start a new game. It's very common for players to say that performance-oriented layouts feel strange at first. That's expected. Old layouts feel good because they're familiar, not because they're optimal. If you give your brain time to adapt, the new layout will eventually feel natural and more reliable under pressure. To build your own golden layout, start by identifying your survival actions and assigning them to your fastest, most reliable inputs. Next, identify your high commit actions and make sure they require deliberate input. Finally, push everything else outward, away from your core survival controls. Always designed for panic, not perfection. In the top left, we have the primary survival and movement. Middle column, we have secondary, deliberate combat and emergencies. Third column, we have tertiary, contextual and low pressure. So when we look at the primary, we see WASD. These are the fastest fingers and the reflex actions. WASD for movement, shift for run and sprint, space for jump, right click for block and deflect, which is not typically the default configuration. Mouse button 4 for dodge and roll, left click for primary light attack. Secondary, middle column, deliberate combat and emergencies, intentional high commitment. Mouse button 5, which for a lot of people is something you have to reach for, could be used for heavy attack. Mouse wheel right could be heal, mouse wheel left could be reload. Tertiary, contextual low pressure are situational and non-critical. Examples, interact, which is often E, stance, weapon switch, gadget abilities. Here's an important point. Button equality depends on your grip. For me, when I'm holding my mouse, my thumb is actually resting on both mouse button 4 and 5. They're both very accessible. I'm just pressing my thumb down in a different way, and I can easily distinguish between them. So for me, those two buttons are primary eligible. So here we have an overview. Green is the primary, survival and movement. Secondary is deliberate combat, that's yellow. And red is tertiary, contextual, low pressure. If you look at these two diagrams, the green buttons or keys, that is where my fingers are resting. On the mouse, my thumb, button 4, that is where most people have their thumb, right? Left mouse button, right mouse. The other buttons on the mouse, we're labeling here as secondary. For most people, it's like, if I'm reaching for that mouse 5 button, I can do a heavy attack. Mouse wheel to the left and right, which I get not all mice have that feature. It is really nice to have that feature because you're not moving any fingers on the keyboard while you have more buttons available on the mouse. That, like, I'm not telling you to go buy a Razer Naga with like 100 buttons. So those are secondary. For me, moving it to the right is heal. It's often reload as well. Sometimes actually melee. I have melee mapped in like first person shooters, like the melee button instead of F, where I'm losing one of the movement keys. I'm using mouse wheel to the right or left. If we look at the keyboard, those are the typical keys where your fingers are resting. Everything else is tertiary. Why? If we have to use one of those fingers, press another key, we're losing movement. We're losing running, direction, or jump. That's not great. And then on the keyboard, ideally, you do not want to move these fingers. So the only keys that are available to you are tertiary keys. And you could also say, hey, there's a fourth category because those are all the white keys. Yeah, you could say that as well. And then there are custom keyboards where you can add layers as well, which makes those keys very accessible because you just switch your thumb to a different key and now it's a different layer and your fingers are already on like the numpad, so you can use the numbers for spells and stuff like that. So what is the key takeaway here? Stop fighting your controls. Make the layout work for you. Let skill express itself, and boss fights should test decisions, not your keybinds.